وسهلا بكل الذين ينضموا للاستماع إلى راديو بلدي أول راديو عربي أمريكي ويعنى بقضايا العرب في المهجر. برامجنا في راديو بلدي كل يوم جمعة من 8 وحتى 9 صباحا مع ليلى الحسيني في بث حي ومباشر عبر wnzk راديو 690 AM. صباح الخير بلدي، صباح الخير لكل مستمعينا.
Welcome to Radio Baladi, the first Arab, Middle Eastern, and American simulcast radio show. Radio Baladi is broadcast every Friday morning on WNZK 690 AM from 8 until 9 Eastern Time on Good Morning Michigan with Layla Al-Husseini. Our call-in number 248-557-3300. And now, stay tuned for the best radio talk show on Arab and American issues with your host, Layla Al-Husseini.
This is Dr. Sahar Khamis. Join me on the third Friday of each month at 8 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. I'll be discussing some of the most important current political, economic, and social issues in my program, The Bridge. On Radio Baladi, on America's Voice of the Arabs, WNZK 690 AM and wdmv 700 AM. Good morning, everyone. This is your host, Dr. Sahar Khamis. Welcome to another great program on Radio Baladi on US Arab Radio. We are continuing today our discussion about the very important topic, countering Islamophobia and countering radicalization. How to fight these two parallel struggles. What can we do about these two very important issues? There is no doubt that these two issues, radicalization and Islamophobia, have been on the rise lately, causing great problems, great issues for the Muslim American community in particular. What could be some of the strategies to fight radicalization and to fight Islamophobia? How are they connected and related to each other? What are some of the do's and don'ts in this fight and in this struggle? With me this morning, continuing this very important discussion, is our dear guest, Dr. Houda Abadi, the Associate Director of the Conflict Resolution Program at the Carter Center. Welcome again to the show, Houda.
Thank you very much. Good morning. Thank you for having me. Happy to be back on your show.
Thank you so much. Just to recap quickly for our listeners who are not with us for the first part, just to remind people about the important connection, why we are bringing about this important issue, which is the topic of our show and our program last time and today as well. The connection or the link that may be not so clear in some people's minds about why radicalization and Islamophobia are somehow interconnected and interrelated to each other. If you can just very quickly recap some of the most important connections and overlaps that would make these two issues somehow relevant and related to each other, please.
Absolutely. So as I mentioned last time in more depth is that radicalization and Islamophobia, basically they are connected. Islamophobia existed for a long, long time and is deeply interconnected with issues of racism, xenophobia, misogyny, and anti-immigrant bias. It is historical and structural, but what we see now is that we have seen an increase of Islamophobia because of the aggressive security approach that many governments have been taking to tackle radicalization. And when I mean radicalization, specifically looking at only groups, violent extremist groups that are Muslim, and not looking as much into rise of white supremacy groups. So what has happened is by taking this very narrow approach, we have conflated Islam and terrorism and have created more misunderstanding. And we can see that I always say that Daesh and Islamophobia are two faces of the same coin. We cannot talk about one without talking about the other. And we can see that Daesh have used Islamophobia in its propaganda to recruit people to say, look at the double standards that you live in terms of their own propaganda.
Mm-hmm. So these are very important points that really some people I feel do not see these connections and do not really understand these very important links and these very important connections. And maybe the importance of Islamophobia is even more prevalent and more pressing now. Everybody is talking about the retweets, of course, that President Trump unfortunately has been retweeting on social media from some of the alt-right groups carrying some very, very disturbing messages about Muslims and false, of course, information and false stuff about Muslims. Would that something that would be tackled maybe in one of the future programs, like these very disturbing recent developments in terms of the retweets and how that feeds into the whole notion of Islamophobia?
Absolutely. I think we are living in very tiring and very troubling times right now. And it's very dangerous to have these types of hateful messages coming from the White House, inciting more fear and violence within the community. And what we have seen with the retweets of President Trump is that he is normalizing anti-Muslim hatred and is giving cover to white supremacist groups. Because we have to ask ourselves where these videos came from known Britain First, which is a white nationalist group in the UK. And some of the videos were even fake videos. And when asked that these are fake videos and that you should apologize, the response was, well, it's not important that they're fake or not fake, but that the threat is still there and, radical Islam is still a problem. And we fear for our national security, which basically you can see by doing this, we are not even looking at the problem. So if you look at President Trump's response to Charlottesville, you can see that there was radio silence when Charlottesville happened. You can see that when we had the Vegas shooting, we also did not see this type of response. So there is very much of a double standard of terrorism and how we understand terrorism and to whom that label applies to.
Absolutely. We have a caller online, Mr. Jerry Habba. Good morning. If you want to join us, please.
Thank you, Dr. Sahar Khamis. Thank you for taking my call. How are you?
Doing well. Thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Yeah, thank you very much. And also, I salute your guest, Dr. Houda Abadi. Good morning, Dr. Houda.
Good morning. Thank you.
Yeah, my question is, Dr. Houda, recently in the last few days, and we are all welcoming a beautiful holiday season. If it is Eid, a Christmas holiday, and the Eid like Mawlid al-Nabawi Sharif yesterday, and the Jewish people also. So it's a holiday season for all of us. My question to you, Dr. Houda, the ISIS asked their supporter through Europe and the U.S. to start attacking those countries in the holiday season. So as a doctor, and you have a lot of information about these things, what is our self as a people, as an American, as a Middle Eastern, how do we take this threat against our countries here, and how do we respond, and what kind of protection do we use to protect this country that we live in it? So I would love to hear your answer. Thank you for taking my call, and have a nice day.
Thank you so much, Mr. Jerry Habba. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you for the great question. So there's two things I want to tackle. First of all, I want our listeners to understand that Daesh is trying to create a clash of civilizations. This is part of Daesh's propaganda. They're trying to create an us versus them. So our response needs to be a very smart response in terms of how we are responding to Daesh by not falling into the trap of us versus them. And what I mean by that is the response. If our response is to look at to do what President Trump has been doing in terms of responding to retweeting these types of videos and creating and inciting more hatred, it's not going to make us any safer. It's actually going to bring more harm to us. And that's something we have to be very careful with. Of course, Daesh is a threat. The number one victims, though, of Daesh have been Muslims. I want to remind our listeners to what happened in Sinai just a few days ago, where more than 305, Egyptian Sunnis who were inside the mosque, civilians, were killed. So this is actually even a threat more in the Middle East and North Africa. We have to take it seriously in the U.S. too, but we have to take seriously all forms of violent extremism, which includes in the United States far-right extremism. And according to the FBI and Southern Poverty Law Center, the threat in the United States by domestic far-right is far more than the threat by groups that are affiliated with Daesh. So that we have to be responsible. That's number one. Number two is aggressive security approach only or only military options do not solve the question of radicalization. We need to move beyond that. We need to think outside of the box, because bombing a city to stone ages is not going to defeat ideologies. Actually, it's going to increase also more grievances. So we have to think back on what are other creative ways to fight radicalization and work with communities and grassroots organizations that are in those communities and might be the number one victims. And
these are very important points, Houda. I think that we don't disagree on the diagnosis, right? The diagnosis is that there's definitely an issue with these groups, and these groups need to be fought definitely to fight their evil. But the problem here is, what do we do about them? So the difference here in different views and perspectives and approaches has been on what to do about them. And as you said, the predominant model has been the security model. And, as you said, most of the victims of these groups are Muslims themselves. So there are two issues here. The first one about the security approach. What are some of the problems with using this security approach? Some of the listeners will say, what's wrong with using the security approach? Why is that problematic?
Well, my simple answer is that since the war on terror, since 9/11, it has not worked. It actually has not worked. Look at where we are today. We are living in more troubling times. We hear about more bombings. We don't know whether we're safe or not safe anymore. There's no more sacred space. If we go back to Egypt and what happened in Sinai, it's a clear example that in Sinai in Egypt, that entire area, there was heavy military. I mean, the Egyptian government spent so much money in militarizing that part of Sinai, where even journalists were not able to go for more than 3 years in northern parts of Sinai. But it has not resulted in being even able to get rid of these terrorist groups. So yes, there are times where we need to use the military, but this cannot be the only solution. We have to work with community people that are from those communities and making sure that we do not create more damage and more harm than when we first entered. So I would just say an example, like if Raqqa was bombed to stone ages. I mean, the number of civilians that have died out of those bombs is a lot of concern to many people. Has that created more grievances? Yes, Daesh is no longer, in Raqqa as it used to be. But a lot of the senior leadership actually fled to Turkey. And the civilians paid a heavy price. And now they have a very high list of grievances as well, not only from Daesh, but also from the bombing against Daesh, where many of them saw their families die. So we have to be very cognizant of this issue and to see how can we ensure that not only we're also looking at other models, thinking outside of the box, because what we have done for more than the last 10, 15 years was a security approach.
Which, as you said, is not really resolving the problem or resolving the issue, but rather we are seeing even worse consequences and worse results because of that.
Absolutely.
We will come back to this great discussion right after this commercial break. Stay tuned, please.
The Rama Relief Foundation provides humanitarian aid into areas inside of war-torn Syria, as well as aid to the refugees who have fled to the neighboring countries in the Middle East. The foundation offers food baskets, container shipment, mental health, education, soup kitchens, and more. Go to ramarelief.org or call 248-990-4247. Any donation amount made to Rama will go to sustaining many lives. Call now 248-990-4247.
Ziyad brand. Quality products from our family to yours. Ziyad Brothers Importing offers the finest quality products, including brands like Sultan, Kraft, Nestle, Hook, Rico Picon, Donna, and many more. Ask your retailer to carry these fine products because you deserve the very best. For more information, visit our website at www.ziyad.com. That's www.ziyad.com. Ziyad, quality products from our family to yours.
When it comes to reproductive medicine, IVF Michigan Fertility Centers are the recognized leaders. With locations in Bloomfield Hills and 5 other cities in Michigan and Ohio, IVF has experts in all aspects of the field. As a founding member of IVF Michigan Fertility Centers, Dr. Nicholas Shama is one of the leading reproductive endocrinologists in Michigan and Ohio. Dr. Shama has performed over 10,000 IVF cases and has helped thousands of couples fulfill their dreams of parenthood. American board certified in both obstetrics and gynecology and reproductive endocrinology and infertility, Dr. Nicholas Shama is a very caring, compassionate, expert physician that understands not only the medical but also the emotional toil of infertility on his patients. When it's time, get personalized care from Dr. Nicholas Shama at IVF Michigan Fertility Centers in Michigan and Ohio. Call toll-free 855-952-9600, 855-952-9600.
Are you going to start a restaurant or grocery store soon? Do you need floor plans and designs? Call Naji Abood at 734-744-9796. Do you want to buy kitchen and restaurant equipment at discount prices? Call Naji Abood now, 734-744-9796. New Concept Products and Design, the trademark of kitchen equipment. 5% discount on all purchases of $75,000 or more. New Concept Products and Design, new location, 31185 Schoolcraft in Livonia. Learn more at www.newconceptproducts.com. Call Naji Abood, 734-744-9796.
This is Dr. Sahar Khamis. Join me on the 3rd Friday of each month at 8 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. I'll be discussing some of the most important current political, economic, and social issues in my program, The Bridge. On Radio Baladi, on America's Voice of the Arabs, WNZK 690 AM and WDMV 700 AM. Welcome back to the show, everybody. This is your host, Dr. Sahar Khamis, and we are continuing our discussion about the very important topic, countering Islamophobia and countering radicalization, 2 parallel struggles. And with me this morning, continuing this important discussion, is our distinguished guest, Dr. Houda Abadi, Associate Director of the Conflict Resolution Program at the Carter Center. Houda, the reason we had you again on the show, of course, is because we love talking to you. This is number one. But also because we did not have a chance to finish discussing some very important points from last time as well. So one of the things I really wanted to talk about last time was rehabilitation. And I was asked this question recently on a media interview, especially after the exit of, ISIS from Iraq and Syria, from many parts of Iraq and Syria, and their military defeat. That left a lot of issues in terms of the families of these fighters. Where did these fighters go? What's going to happen to the families? How can we rehabilitate or integrate some of the returnees? So if you can please talk a little bit about some of these issues.
Yeah. This is a very good question and actually very timely right now, especially with what we are facing with returnees coming back. Interestingly enough, though, not as many returnees, there are not as many foreign fighters returning back as we expected them to be. According to the Sufen Center, at least 5,600 returnees from 33 countries have returned home. Okay? And 2,000 former Daesh members have returned to Western countries, including 7 to the United States. There is a dire need to look at a rights-based approach to rehabilitation. What do I mean by this? So far, the international community, there is not an agreement on what do we do with these returnees that are returning back. There's no law that is everyone is agreeing on. So what do we sentence them with? Or what is the evidence of their concrete crime? What are the threats of the returnees? And knowing that we know as a fact that the prison system is the number one place of radicalization. So putting them just in the prison is not going to make us any safer. So there is a dire need for rehabilitation and reintegration center. That's one. The second one that is a little bit making the equation more complicated is more women and children have returned than initial estimates estimated. And that is very, very problematic in terms of what do we do with these children. Many of them, some of them were born in Daesh territory without their free choice, of course. They're minors. Some of them left with families when they were 1 or 2 years old. So a lot of these women and children are coming back, and we have to figure out what do we do with these children, minors, who will need moral support, psychosocial support, who have seen all of what they have seen has been bloodshed and death and violence. And so it has been normalized, and we cannot just put them back in society. So that's one. So the thing I always say is we really need to investigate on the types of returnees. And what I mean by this is not everyone who joined Daesh has gone for the same reason. And that's very important for us before we are able to figure out what do we do. So there's not a one-size-fits-all. There are people who left to Daesh, who left very early to when basically the war just started breaking in Syria, and they joined because they thought this was the Arab Spring in Syria, and they wanted to get rid of Bashar al-Assad. And there wasn't really a Daesh at that time. And so they were there to free the people, and that was their intention. It was not ideologically based. And I call that the first wave. They stayed, they went there, there was a short stay, but they never really deeply integrated into Daesh. And a lot of them, once they went there, they said, oh my goodness, this is not what we signed up for. We thought that we are going to go and defend the Syrian people, and we're ending up in this big mess, and they wanted to return back. And I know there are many cases like that. But then there are those who joined Daesh but disagreed with their methods and ideology, but went there because of money, financial support, etc. Those, we have to deal with them differently from those who were content with Daesh and were fully committed, but then they were captured, you know? And those are the ones that we have to be careful, the ones that were, ideologically based, and they are, and we have to realize, okay, what are we going to do? These would be dangerous people to have them free. But then there are those that left because it was not ideology either. They went there because they thought that it's not what they signed up for. They thought it was they were going to free Syria, or they did not want to join Daesh. They were against the ideology. They thought it was this utopia. They bought into the propaganda, and when they saw the reality, they disagreed and wanted to come back. So motivation for joining will be mixed, and a few who left did so for only the pure appeal of violence. So we have to really look at each case by case before we can assess what are we going to do with these returnees. But centers we definitely need centers for rehabilitation and reintegration, but it should be individualized, responding to the motivation, the context, and the circumstance.
Absolutely, but there's a very important point here, Houda. I totally agree with you, but there's a problem. No matter what are the motivations or the intentions of those who joined or those who were even born into, like you said, Daesh families or Daesh territories, there is still the problem of social stigmatization. There's a social stigma, and you're talking here about traditional societies in some parts of Iraq or Syria or other parts of the Arab world. These are traditional societies. They don't easily accept the idea of, even a woman or a child who was put into this situation against their own will. Still, there is a form of social stigma. What could be done about some of these cultural mindsets and social stigmatizations that could really be a barrier to their rehabilitation and reintegration?
You hit it on the spot. Absolutely. So it's a two things. It's not only the individuals that we have to respond to, those that have gone, but also to the community. And you are absolutely right. I've conducted interviews in northern Morocco where not only the people who have joined Daesh, we're not talking only about returnees, but the families that were left behind are socially stigmatized. And I can give you many, many examples where wives who had no idea that their husbands left to Daesh were left alone. They were in debt. Their husbands took a debt and put it on the wife, and they had to manage it. And there was so much social stigma that the CSOs or civil society organizations who could provide those help were so worried even providing help to those families left behind because it is a very sensitive, politicized matter. So when I mean rehabilitation, I also want to say, how can we have discussions with the community as well? The community needs to be part of the rehabilitation process. We cannot just rehabilitate the returnees. According to what they have committed, the crimes that they have committed, or the circumstances in which they have left, and providing them with moral, social support and trying to see where they are. But also the communities have to be part of that process. We can look at the example of Tunisia, where you had people going out to the streets in Tunis and saying, we don't want any returnees to come back. And it was a very polarizing issue. They did not want anyone to come back. So there needs to be a national dialogue. This is a reality. There was, in some communities, there has been a mass exodus that are going to come back. So there needs to be a national dialogue. Rehabilitation programs have to take into consideration the families, and those local communities as well have to be part of the solution.
Absolutely. And we have 2 minutes before we go to the next break. So if you can tell us quickly, Houda, are there certainly some plans now or programs underway at the Carter Center in order to tackle some of the issues you just talked about right now?
We are honestly just starting to explore these issues. We do not have any current programs on rehabilitation, reintegration right now, but we are learning more about it. We are bringing more experts and looking at different models, European models and successful and not successful models, to learn more about this process and what can be done. Because like I mentioned in the first workshop, we train community and religious leaders who have to deal with these issues. So the one thing that we do is we bring experts that work specifically on these issues, and this is their expertise that can help our community leaders when they go back home.
So basically, it's a grassroots, a bottom-up approach that engages the local community, including, I assume, religious leaders, I assume public opinion leaders in the community, some of the prominent figures would have an impact on people's mindset and habits and traditions, correct?
Yes. Before we go on the break, very quickly, I just want to make this point because it's very important. Returned children pose a particular problem. The children, we have to see them as primarily victims, and to look at them like when we look at war and child soldiers. A lot of times they did not have a choice, and they definitely need extensive psychological and social support to heal.
I cannot agree more. This is definitely a very important issue because these are kids, they're children, they're innocent, and they were born into this terrible, tragic situation. And definitely there should be special programs designed for these children to take care of them and to address their specific social and psychological needs. And I hope this is something also that the Carter Center will be looking at as well within its program and agenda.
Thank you.
We're going to go back now for a commercial break. Stay tuned, please.
The Rama Relief Foundation provides humanitarian aid into areas inside of war-torn Syria, as well as aid to the refugees who have fled to the neighboring countries in the Middle East. The foundation offers food baskets, container shipment, mental health, education, soup kitchens, and more. Go to ramarelief.org or call 248-990-4247. Any donation amount made to Rama will go to sustaining many lives. Call now 248-990-4247.
When you're looking for the best in optical care, Dr. Imad Nakash is your doctor to see. With years of experience and thousands of successful procedures performed, you can trust your eyes to Dr. Imad Nakash. See Dr. Imad Nakash and his professional staff for your eye care needs. There's 2 locations to serve you. In Hazel Park, call 248-336-3937. 248-336-3937. In Rochester Hills, call 248-299-3937. That's 248-299-3937.
Life for Relief and Development is a nonprofit charity that has been providing humanitarian aid and development to people and communities regardless of race, color, religion, or cultural background for over 22 years. When disaster occurs here or around the world, Life rushes to provide food, medical aid, and shelter to those in need. Life also has development projects that provide medical relief, water purification, educational programs, relief for orphans, and much more. Your help and support can greatly improve these efforts. All donations are tax deductible. For more information, please visit our website at lifeusa.org or call 248-424-7493. That's lifeusa.org, 248-424-7493.
This is Dr. Sahar Khamis. Join me on the 3rd Friday of each month at 8 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. I'll be discussing some of the most important current political, economic, and social issues in my program, The Bridge. On Radio Baladi, on America's Voice of the Arabs, WNZK 690 AM and WDMV 700 AM. Welcome back to the show, everybody. This is your host, Dr. Sahar Khamis, and we are continuing our discussion today with the important topic, the parallel struggles, countering Islamophobia and countering radicalization. And with me this morning discussing this important topic is our guest, Dr. Houda Abadi, Associate Director of the Conflict Resolution Program at the Carter Center. Houda, before going on to discuss some of the points that I wanted to cover and we didn't have a chance to address last time, we cannot ignore, of course, the massacre that happened in Sinai, and I'm glad that you mentioned it. Of course, may God bless the victims, the innocent victims, and give cure to the injured and give patience and endurance to the families. Amen.
Amen. Amen.
What lessons can be learned from this horrific massacre? I mean, that's an area, like you said, which had military, and at the same time that did not give security or safety or stability to the region. And I think that Muna Al-Tahawi wrote a very good article in the New York Times in which she said that the Egyptian government did not address the issue in the right way, and it did not really manage to successfully contain this whole issue of Sinai and what's happening in Sinai, or even how to deal with the people of Sinai in the right way. What lessons can we draw from this horrible massacre and tragedy?
I mean, you hit it on the spot, really. In terms of what happened in Sinai, there's few lessons that we can learn. A is, like I mentioned previously, this part of Sinai has been heavily militarized, a heavy security approach without really partnering with the local communities. There has been a lot of a lot of conflict inside this territory between the military and the locals. So the grievances were very much high. And even with all of this militarized response to the question of terrorism in Sinai, the Daesh was still successful in doing, in massacring more than 300 people inside a mosque. Mm-hmm. So may God give peace and patience, sabr to the victims and their families. So again, this shows that we cannot look at the approach that the Egyptian government has taken has been an approach that many other governments have taken in terms of looking at it from an only security approach, creating more harm. And if we look at Egypt right now in general terms, there has been much more oppressive policies affecting Egypt and making it more unsafe, affecting more tourism, a lack of tourism, and people being scared to visit. Human rights activists have been jailed using terrorism laws to jail any form of opposition. This does not equate a free society where freedom of press, freedom of expression is encouraged and is flourished for a healthy society. Again, we have to look back at what can we do. We cannot apply terrorism laws blindly to shut any form of opposition. It's not going to work. It's going to create more grievances. There will be groups that would want to revenge more. And we really cannot do anything without partnering with the local communities and, most importantly, building trust. How can we have a government body that is supposedly trying to protect the people, and the people don't trust that particular body of government? It's very problematic. So that's one in terms of Egypt. The second thing is it shows also from an international scale, it shows the double standards that we have internationally in terms of where is the outcry in Sinai, or where is it where we've seen, we are all Sinai, international outcry. So we can see that brown lives don't matter as much. And even though this has been one of the largest massacres, the people have not been responding the same way. So we really need, from an international perspective, to rethink these issues of terrorism and the double standards that we have.
Absolutely. Look, we saw what happened, like the Charlie Hebdo attack, just we Charlie and all of the international, outcry and solidarity and all of that. And absolutely, like you said, like I'm an Egyptian myself, of course, and it really hurts my heart to see that the international community is not responding in the same way. Although some people say that part of the problem has been also the under coverage of these issues in the media and the media blackout, and the fact that there hasn't been enough reporting on the incident, which makes things even worse because it did not get the same kind of attention that it actually deserves. But also one important point that Muna Tahawi mentioned in this New York Times article I mentioned was the idea that Sinai has not been developed by the government. The government did not really work in alliance, like you said, with the people. You mentioned the point about trust. But I also want to talk about development with local community, like giving services and providing a better living and economic opportunities and employment. Isn't this also an important component, Houda?
Absolutely. We at the Carter Center have analyzed more than 630 Daesh propaganda videos, and we have identified 7 main narratives or main appeals that Daesh uses to recruit people. 7 main arguments that they use emotionally to recruit people. The religious appeal, which means like you join Daesh to be a good Muslim or to go to heaven, is less than 9%. I want to repeat it. The religious appeal that Daesh uses to recruit people is less than 9% through the 630 videos that we have coded. However, you can see that the other forms of appeal, which responds to your question, is providing social services, That's what Daesh has been using. I mean, it has been banking on local grievances depending on the current context of the target community that they're doing. So one is providing social services. That plays an important role in communities where the government has not played this role. And I always say, instead of spending millions and millions of dollars in governments in providing counter narratives, meaning like, this is counter narratives on Daesh and, and this is not Islamic, etc. The governments really, their primary role also is to provide counter offers, alternatives in terms of, providing social goods and services so people can have the dignity of life. And instead of dreaming of dying, they dream of living.
Very important point, Houda. I wish that more and more policy makers and decision makers and academics and media people as well pay attention to this very important point, because I think this is again another blind spot that many people do not see. They will just think, Daesh propaganda is just about go and fight and become a martyr, and they don't understand all of these other appeals, which is why also governments should work on issues of development and working with the local communities. There is no question about it. Now we are seeing more and more evidence that the security approach alone is not really a solution. Rather, it adds to the problem. It somehow creates a vicious cycle, if you will, a vicious cycle of increased violence. One important point I wanted to cover last time when we didn't have a chance to cover it, Houda, was the very important symposium on countering Islamophobia that you held at the Carter Center recently, and I had the honor and pleasure of participating in as one of the experts. What were the motivations, the reasons behind holding this symposium?
Very good question. I mean, from the beginning, I've been seeing through this project that we have at the Carter Center is that, Islamophobia is another form of extremism, violent extremism, really. And we have to think of it that way. We cannot look at Daesh without not looking at the rise of Islamophobia and how our security approach has increased and done more harm in terms of the rise of white supremacy groups, in terms of hate crimes against Muslims or people that look Muslims. I want to share with you a few statistics for our listeners. From 2014 to 2016, anti-Muslim bias incidents jumped 65%. 65%. And in that 2 years period, CARE found that hate crimes targeting Muslims surged 584%. Now, if we look at Southern Poverty Law Center, which is a very respected organization, it stated that from 2015 to 2016, anti-Muslim hate groups grew 197%. This is a really serious issue. This is, we are tearing the social fabric within the United States and creating this us versus them and a clash of civilization, which is not making us any safer. We should not fall into the trap of what Daesh's propaganda, what it wants us to do. So this is one of the reasons that we wanted to have a symposium at the Carter Center to really understand more how Islamophobia manifests itself in law and policy, and what can we do and how can we equip our religious and community leaders to be able to tackle two forms of extremism, Daesh on the one hand, but also Islamophobia. So we brought 29 experts. We were fortunate to have you among us as well. And they included scholars, journalists, civil society actors, and religious leaders from 7 countries to discuss these various issues. And I am very happy to share with our listeners that the Carter Center released a press statement to condemn the rise of Islamophobia and calling on leaders to tackle this serious issue.
Very important. And we'll come back again to this very important point about the statement that the Carter Center issued and what is really the relevance and the importance and significance of this statement right after this commercial break. Stay tuned, please.
عندي سؤال يا جدي شاغلني ومحيرني قصتها عيلة عريقة بترويها، منتجات أصلية جودتها بتشهد إلها، منها وكبرت معنا كل بيوت تلاقيها، العيلة وجيراني وأهلي ما بدوروا إلا عليها، لأنه زياد يا جدي بتجيب المنتج بلدي بلدي، وبتخليني أتذكر أصالة وعراقة بلدي.
أجود المنتجات الغذائية من عائلتنا إلى عائلتكم.
قشات ميديترينيان ماركت بإدارة ساهر قشات وأولاده يرحبون بالجالية العربية والكلدانية، جميع أنواع المواد الغذائية، ألبان طازجة، الكرزات والبهارات الطازجة. داخل الأسواق مطعم ميديترينيان شيش كباب يقدم يوميا جميع أنواع الكباب، المقبلات العربية العراقية وصواني الكامبو المميزة. تفتح الأسواق من 8 إلى 9 مساء من الاثنين وحتى السبت، ومن 8 صباحا إلى 9 مساء يوم الأحد. تقع الأسواق على 32839 نورث ويسترن هايوي في مدينة فارمينغتون هيلز. لحوم حلال للجالية الإسلامية، لطلباتكم من المطعم كول 248-538-7855. That is 248-538-7855. قشة ميديترينيان ماركت، خدمة متميزة ومعاملة راقية.
بدأناه معكم وعاهدناكم على أن نستمر بمزيد من المتعة والعروض الحصرية على قناتي زي ألوان وزي أفلام. زي ألوان هي أول وأكبر قناة مسلسلات عربية هندية في أمريكا، أضخم الإنتاجات، مسلسلات حصرية. ومع زي أفلام فأنتم على موعد مع مغامرة جديدة كل يوم لاكتشاف سحر بوليوود. تابعوا حصريا قناتي زي ألوان وزي أفلام الآن في أمريكا على ديش نتورك وسلينج تي في.
أسواق زمزم الواقع على 24065 أورشارد ليك في مدينة فارمينغتون هيلز ترحب بالجالية العربية والكلدانية. تنزيلات كبيرة على عموم المواد الغذائية في يوم الأربعاء من كل أسبوع. لا تنسوا فريش كاري اوت، جميع انواع المعجنات، وايضا صواني الكامبو المشكله والصمون الحار. لحوم حلال الجاليه العربيه والاسلاميه، الملحمه باداره قصاب الجاليه المعروف سلوان جربوع. زوروهم على 24065 اورشارد ليك في مدينه فارمينغتون هيلز، او اتصلوا بهم على 248-476-0300. اسواق زمزم للمذاق عنوان لجميع طلباتكم، اتصلوا على 248-476-0300. اسواق زمزم للمعامله الراقية وكرم الضيافة عنوان.
This is Dr. Sahar Khamis. Join me on the third Friday of each month at 8 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. I'll be discussing some of the most important current political, economic, and social issues in my program, The Bridge. On Radio Baladi, on America's Voice of the Arabs, WNZK 690 AM and WDMV 700 AM. Welcome back to the show, everybody. This is your host, Dr. Sahar Khamis. We're continuing our important discussion on the two parallel struggles, countering Islamophobia and countering radicalization. And with me this morning is our guest, Dr. Houda Abadi, Associate Director of the Conflict Resolution Program at the Carter Center. Houda, you mentioned that the symposium came up with some recommendations, a statement that has been issued in order to condemn Islamophobia and to also give some recommendations as to what could be best done about it. Can you please inform our audience, our listeners, about some of the most important points that came about in this statement?
Of course. So we did a few things. So first of all, we had a symposium, a 3-day long symposium at the Carter Center to really have time to discuss the various manifestations of the Islamophobia industry. So how is it funded? How is it manifested in the media? What can we do? How can we empower community and religious leaders? What are strategies to counter this at the local and at the international level? We have, and I encourage anyone who is interested to go to our website, www.cartercenter.org, and look at inclusive approaches to preventing violent extremism. They will find the report on the Islamophobia report in more depth. After following during the closed symposium, we also had convened a public panel that brought more than 250, 300 people to the Carter Center to discuss these issues with the local community, so the local community can participate in these discussions through an informal Q&A. And after these 3 days, the Carter Center was deeply concerned about the alarming rise of Islamophobia and released a press statement to say that the Islamophobia basically is a threat to human rights and to peace and security. So the Carter Center is devoting resources to understanding and combating Islamophobia. Most importantly, one of the main conclusions is that Islamophobia is not a Muslim issue, but it is a human rights issue. And Islamophobia is another form of institutional racism that we need to confront. We have to speak forcefully against it, and that Islamophobic hate speech and anti-Muslim attacks, interestingly, do not coordinate only with terrorist attacks, but also follow trends in the U.S. election politics. So it's you can see, for example, during the presidential campaigns, the rise of Islamophobia incidences in the United States increased, more than doubled during the presidential campaigns, because a lot were using Islamophobia as a tool to basically recruit people to their own party.
Mm-hmm. And then we started our conversation this morning talking about the retweets, of course, from President Trump, which I'm afraid are not only normalizing Islamophobia, but I'm afraid it's even going to increase the level of Islamophobia and even violent attacks, God forbid, against the Muslim American community.
Absolutely. They are not only normalizing, but I mean, if we just take a moment to think about it, even if it's normalizing a sitting president normalizing hatred is really serious and dangerous. Not only that, but the impact it's going to have from a sitting president normalizing hatred will only encourage other groups, white supremacist groups, to continue with violence and inciting more fear, inciting more violence. And it's not making us any safer. The State Department sent a letter to the White House telling them that they were concerned about safety after the tweets after the 3 videos that President Trump tweeted.
Absolutely. It's enabling and emboldening some of these hate groups and white supremacist groups. And we have seen some of that right after the election of Trump. And again, the retweets are very troubling for this very particular reason. And you also mentioned a very important point, which is Islamophobia being part and parcel of the bigger human rights issues. We cannot detach it from issues like xenophobia and homophobia and anti-Semitism and racism of all forms. The connection here also needs to be somehow highlighted to our listeners, please, Houda. What are some of the links between Islamophobia and some of these other forms of hatred and discrimination?
Absolutely. We need an intersectional approach to fighting racism and fighting hatred and extremism. And what I mean by that is that we need to unite together. We can see what has been happening, the police brutality on African American communities. We can see how Trump has used hate speech against immigrants, against Mexicans, we can see that there's a correlation. Actually, white supremacy groups have been targeting LGBTQI communities and Muslim communities together. So there is an absolute link, and that's why I'm saying that Islamophobia is deeply interconnected with issues of racism, xenophobia, misogyny, anti-immigrant bias, and other forms of discrimination. And Islamophobia, to make it clear, is intentional. So it's not unconscious, it's intentional. The decision to retweet these 3 videos are intentional, often serving those in position of power that seek to maintain the status quo or increase their popularity ratings. So to be able to look, if we are looking at Islamophobia as a human rights issue, that we can see the clear connections between other forms of racism, black racism, anti-immigration sentiment, anti-LGBTQ, then we are able, if we come together and are able to fight and counter all forms of violent extremism, that is what is going to make us stronger. We have to unite because we have one objective, one goal, and honestly, the same groups that we are trying to confront. So we are in this together. Exactly.
Absolutely. Same enemies. Those who are spreading hatred, discrimination, racism, bias are the very same groups, basically, and they really target all of these different groups, so we have to stand united. This is a time for unity and a time for solidarity between all of the different sensible, mature people. Absolutely, I agree. Houda, we have just like a few minutes, actually a couple of minutes left in the show, and I want to quickly just go back to the statement issued by the Carter Center, because this is very important. If you can, like in a couple of minutes, recap and tell our listeners also the policy recommendations. I know that the statement was very strong and it, of course, condemned, again, Islamophobia, talked about it as a human rights issue. But if you can, in a couple of minutes, tell our listeners also some of the most important policy recommendations that came out of this statement, please.
Of course. One of them is we wanted to use our platform to bring more visibility to this issue, to this serious issue. We are able, with our resources, to convene various senior scholars and practitioners from various parts of the world, really different parts of the world, to come together and highlight the importance of this serious issue and bring awareness. Because, I won't tell you how many times I've been in meetings where the word Islamophobia with senior sometimes senior government representatives, where the word Islamophobia is still controversial. There's still an argument, what is Islamophobia? Is it really a form of institutional racism or not? Is there such a thing as Islamophobia? I mean, we have such a long way to go that in a lot of meetings, these are some of the questions that I get. So one of the things was to put it as that Islamophobia is a systemic and institutional form of racism that is embedded in law and policy, and to highlight the various manifestations of how it is embedded in law and policy and what we can do. Second recommendation is that civil society groups must speak forcefully and consistently against Islamophobia, especially when it informs public and foreign policy. It's very easy for us to condemn Daesh or to say, oh, look at these Muslim extremists, which is even, and they're the driving force behind terrorism. But this is riddled with false assumptions. But we have a hard time condemning publicly white supremacy. We have a hard time to condemn publicly rise of Islamophobia, xenophobia, anti-Semitism, and we need to forcefully be able to do that.
Absolutely. Well, I'm afraid we're coming to the end of our show. Another very beautiful and very informative discussion with Dr. Houda Abadi. Thank you so much, Houda, both for being with us as a guest on the show and also for all the great work you're doing with the Carter Center.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you so much. And thank you so much to all our listeners this morning. Thank you for being with us. Thank you and have a blessed day. Goodbye.